The title of this evening was A New Political Vision for Britain. I guess that's simply what I want to present. And I do have because I do these meetings very frequently, I do have to try and make them varied and try and talk about different things. So I thought this evening, let me talk about a vision that I haven't necessarily discussed before. And I think that in politics, certainly now, and the only thing I have to go on is now, I often wonder, a few generations ago, did people think that all their politicians were corrupt? Or is it just us? Or is it always been this way? 100 years ago, did people think the same way about their politicians that we do now?
Not as bad as it is now.
I reckon things have gotten worse. I reckon things have gotten worse. But then I wonder, does everyone think things have gotten worse? But part of what drives me to do this is my disgust at, and disgust is the word. It's not a word I necessarily want to use, but I have to use it because it's the only one that fits. My disgust at the people who sit, 650 people, sit in the House of Commons in this country. They are put there by the tax-paying, decent majority of this country. They are supposed to be there to do a job, and that is to represent the tax-paying, decent majority of this country. And to represent, to make it clear, to my mind at least, is to act in the best interests of. I see it almost like a solicitor-client arrangement. It can't be held to a legal standard like that, in the way that a retainer between a solicitor and a client will be. And the reason it can't be is because politicians will very often want to do something and find that they can't. So I don't think they should be sued for it. But there must, the moral aspect of it, to me, is similar. That the MP has a moral and democratic duty to act in the best interests of those who elect them. And from that simple notion is where the rest of my politics comes from. That's why I believe that the British government should take a pro-British position on all aspects. I think it's a given. To me, it's a given. You were elected by the British people. You weren't elected by the people of Somalia. You weren't elected by the people of Nigeria. You weren't elected by the people of Poland. You weren't elected by the people of Iceland. You were elected by the people of Britain. And it is your duty to act always in the best interests of the people of Britain. That's what my foundation is. That's what I believe in. I believe it's morally right. I believe it's democracy defined. And I believe in democracy. I believe in the decent majority, and I believe that if the decent majority has a say, has this say, they will work it out. Trust in the people. They'll do the right thing. Yeah. Trust in the people. They will do the right thing. So that's where my foundations are. I see this takes me into discussion and thinking about the European Union. I think it is a tyranny. It is no less than a tyranny, a totalitarian tyranny designed to be so, and unashamedly so. Which wants to take away the voice of the people all over Europe and install a remote, unaccountable bureaucracy in the geographic heart, or relatively so, in Europe. Or Brussels is not necessarily in mind. It is a totalitarianism, and I see this when I see our capitulation, when I see Britain's capitulation to Europe over and over and over again, over and over again. You watch these negotiations that are going on, if you can call them that, and the UK acts like it has no power whatsoever. It says, thank you, sir, to every demand that Brussels makes. It's shameful. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
It's traitorous. It's like traitor behaviour.
That's exactly it. They're betraying the people. They're betraying the people. And we're watching a debate now from the disgraceful Labour Party, who seems to think there was no referendum. Let's discuss what to do about the European Union. It's what they do. As if we haven't already said what to do about the European Union. Then you'll see this sneaky, snake-like approach, this behaviour, where they'll use democracy in order to ignore the democratic vote. They'll pay homage to democracy in words only, while using it, exploiting it to try and overturn the democratic vote. This is what they'll say. Democracy hasn't died. Democracy didn't die the day after Brexit. We still have every right to carry on campaigning for an end to Brexit, to keep us in the European Union. This is democracy. No, it's not. No, it's not. The whole point of debate and discussion and voting is so that the result may be implemented. If we don't implement it, then there's no point in doing it. So what they're saying is we should keep going around and around, campaign, campaign, campaign. We can vote, but then if we don't, we'll vote again, we'll campaign. This is nonsense. This is nonsense. We must implement the result of this, and if we don't, then the vote is null and void. The vote is null and void. It's over. It's done, people. Another way, of course, is this system that we have, this media conglomerate that we have in place. If I truly believe in the majority, I believe that the majority will get this right if we trust in the majority. But we have this poison in the middle called the media. And this is a filter between the candidate and the person who is listening to the candidate. And through that filter, we are coming out, what I'm saying is going in one side, and what's coming out the other side is entirely different, entirely different. This is where we get this far-right poison. This is where we get this Nazi racist poison. And it's poisoning our entire system. It's poisoning public life. We're in trouble with this. We're in trouble with this. Because people are voting not based on the truth. They're based on lies that they're being told by a biased media. This is, again, democracy in peril. Democracy must have a honest communication between candidate and receiver of message in order for the whole thing to work. So once again, we have a huge democratic deficit, we have a huge democratic problem, and we have a huge betrayal of the people. We have a huge letdown of the people. I see this betrayal also in law and order, in our legal system. Now, we've touched upon it briefly, but one of the main areas that I want for Britain to stand up and really shout about, to make ourselves the most vocal voice in the country about law and order, is very important to me. And it's not about being a sort of heavy-handed society where every slight is pounced upon all the time. It's not about that. It's about priority. It's about knowing what's right and what's wrong. It's about the clarity of the political message. And this, again, brings me back to the political message that we want the people to hear. We want clarity. We want clarity. And one of the messages I want this party to put out is clarity on our morals, on law and order, and why law and order reflects and should reflect our morals. There's no greater example I can use than the grooming gangs, or the child rape gangs, as I'm frequently reminded to call them, because grooming gangs lets them off the hook. These child rape gangs and the child marriage aspects and the female genital mutilation, this horrible abuse of young girls, is the umbrella of the best example I can give of this. We in Britain, we in Europe, we decided, didn't we, that that raping underage girls was a terrible, heinous thing. Didn't we?
Yeah.
I thought we had. I thought we'd settled that debate. I thought we'd settled it.
You judge a society by how it looks
absolutely,
after its most
absolutely. It's children. You judge a society by how it's children, and even if it doesn't always work in practice, which it won't, because we're imperfect, but the laws indicate the morals of the majority of a country, and our laws say that it is wrong. And should carry a hefty prison sentence for an adult to engage in sexual activity with a child. I thought we had settled this. I thought we'd settled this. Now we have immigration from countries that haven't settled this. And once again, we have this moral inversion, this moral weakness. We have child marriage going on in this country. It's being broadcast on national television. a few years ago, ITV investigated, sending an investigation team to various high-profile mosques across this country with an undercover reporter, asking them to forcefully marry an underage girl. And several, I think about more than a third of them, agreed to do so. It was broadcast on national television. One of them was a major mosque in Birmingham. Nothing happened. So people are confused because our politicians don't actually present a vision for the country. They don't present who are we, what is Britain, what do we want Britain to be. This is what I want for Britain to step in to do. And to begin with, let's have some moral clarity. Let's have some moral clarity. I hear nothing from Theresa May about female genital mutilation. Nothing at all. I hear nothing from most of the House of Commons about it. I hear nothing from Theresa May about the forceful marriage of underage girls. There's a group in London, the Iranian and Kurdish Women's Rights Organisation. They'd spoken to a small local paper in Islington. This is going back a few years, about 5 or 6 years ago. And they had spoken, and I don't know whether they are far right or racist, but they're all from Iran, and these are all Muslim women. Telling the Islington, a local Islington paper, that this had happened hundreds of times in that borough alone, and what they described these children as was wives in primary school uniforms, and said that those girls, those primary school girls, had to do every duty of a wife, was how they described it. Now this is published in a newspaper in London, and nothing happens. So what you have when the government doesn't respond, when you hear nothing from the Conservatives or from Labour, who constantly pretend to be all about rights and all about women's rights and give me a break. They know this. They know this. They know little girls are being raped by grown men in the name of Sharia in our capital city, and they do nothing at all. The result is that you have a population who is totally confused about who we are morally. Who are we? I thought we were against child sex. I thought we were against... I thought we had decided this was abhorrent and we wouldn't tolerate it. But now, not only are we tolerating it, our Prime Minister says nothing. The Leader of the Opposition says nothing. And worse, they encourage the very people who are behind it. They encourage the people who are behind it. They encourage these mosques all over the country and interfaith this, dialogue that. No. Tell them in no uncertain terms. We need someone in politics who will say, in no uncertain terms, we will not tolerate this. The public needs to hear that. It needs to hear that. There's no leadership here. There's no leadership here. What we have are game-playing career politicians. And that's exactly what Theresa May is. She's Prime Minister because she's such a great politician. And that's how you become Prime Minister, is by being a great politician. And I don't mean a great leader, I mean a great politician. Someone who knows where to position themselves at the right time, knows what to say at the right time, knows what not to say at the right time. That's a great politician. That's all we've got. We have no leaders. We have no leaders. We need a leader who will say, we will not tolerate this. We will not tolerate this. If you wish to live in the UK, you will do so at the permission of the British people. If you choose to break their laws and their moral code that has sat and been built over generation after generation, that was fought for in several wars, including not that long ago in World War II, that people fought and died for this country, you will either respect it or you won't live in it. We will not tolerate these grotesque practices. We will not tolerate religious violence. We will not tolerate religious intimidation. We will not tolerate a society or your creation of a society where people cannot become ex-Muslims, for example. Ex-Muslims in this country suffer terribly. I've met ex-Muslims. I've known ex-Muslims who had to be removed from their home under armed guard by police because of the threat that they faced. This is not Pakistan. This is the north of England. This is the south of England. This is Wales. This is Scotland. This is all over Europe now. And we need to face it. But we're only going to face it by offering something people can get on board with. It has to be a positive vision of a future Britain. And we have to be clear about what that is we're offering. It's not a policy by policy. Of course, politics in practice works policy by policy. But you must offer the electorate a country. You must make them an offer. And then if you get their support, you will of course do everything in your everyday endeavours to reach that aspiration that you have offered to the public. I think, and I want our offer to the public to be, I want a restoration of the European nation state. Not just ours, but all of them. And many of you might say, well, that's none of our business. Actually, I think it is. I think unless the European Union is gone for good, no one will escape it. Brexit's not going to save us from the European Union. We have to get rid of the European Union. So the future Britain that I want is a Britain that is free, obviously, of the European Union, and as is every other European country. Its borders have been restored. Sensible immigration has been restored. Immigration from societies that are completely incompatible with ours will not be permitted except in very specific exceptions. We will have a UK constitution. I think it's time for a UK constitution. Some would argue we already have one. In theory we do. It's been made up of various legislative chunks over centuries. But I think we need something a bit more robust than that. And over years, new laws replace and overrule old laws. So the Magna Carta, while in theory is still in effect, in practice it isn't. So I think we should take the Magna Carta. We should call our new constitution. We should make the Magna Carta a part of it. We should, in other words, honour the greatness of British history and bring it into a new British future. So we will create a new constitution based on the Magna Carta and things we've learned since then on the fundamentals of liberty of the individual, the rights of the individual, the equal rights of the individual, parliamentary democracy, our right to vote for representatives and to remove them, our right to change our mind and to elect a new government a few years later. These are fundamentals. But fundamentally, I think Section 1 of our new UK constitution must be freedom of speech. Yeah. Must be freedom of speech. We must be able to speak our minds. The only reason a government will try and take away your freedom of speech is to stop you opposing them. It's the only reason. This is what these hate speech laws are all about. There's a policy area that has caused probably the most individual response, emotional response from people, from the public, over the last decade, and that is immigration. Mass immigration into Europe has been a hot topic for a decade at least among people in Europe. It's a primary issue for most voters, certainly in this country, if statistics are to be believed. Mass immigration is also the way that they're going to take away our say. The European Union is bringing in mass immigration from across the world in order to weaken the identity of European countries, to introduce multiculturalism, which will denigrate the cultures of European countries. The idea being to tell us that our culture is no better than one, for example, like Somalia. It is infinitely better. But they will tell us that it's not, that we are every bit, if not worse, in cultural terms than Somalia, or than Iran, where people are stoned to death, or than Pakistan, where people are beheaded for blasphemy, or Saudi Arabia, where people are jailed for years for a Facebook post. We're being told to believe that we are no better than that. We are. We are much, much better than that. But the mass immigration by the European Union is to do this. It's to water down the identity of the original, the host European cultures, and to make them feel ashamed of themselves. And again, I'm not suggesting conspiracy. It's just ideology. It's just how it's working. It's just how it works. So we need to face up to all of this. The immigration is intended to dismantle what we know, to change what we know, to alter what we know, and turn it into something altogether uglier than any of us alive today have ever known. And in order to combat this, we must believe in ourselves. We must fight that attack, this anti-European, anti-Western, anti-white ideology that's weakening us. We need to turn that around, and we only can if we have a true vision. So I shall return to that vision. Beyond the European Union, I want a Britain which is sovereign, where the parliamentary elections mean something, where we're not just going through the motions, where we're not just electing a government to decide who will obey the European Union's orders this time. We're electing an actual government which is answerable to us and not to the European Union. And you'll find that governments seem to care more about their colleagues on internationalist boards than they do about the voting public. And they're far more concerned about upsetting fellow politicians across the waters than they are upsetting their electorate. And largely that's our fault, unfortunately, because until now, for the last 100 years, we have been indulging this two-party state, Labour, Tory, Labour, Tory, Labour, Tory. And this is what For Britain is here to do. We have to do it. We have to do it. We have to persuade people to break that habit and vote differently. We have to. We have to. But habit is a huge issue. Habit is a huge issue. How we break that habit, if you have ideas, let me know. If you have ideas, let me know. We must break that habit. And it's a very difficult one because we've seen such terrible incompetence and negligence and neglect from the two big parties, and these people still vote for them. I'm at a loss until they hear our message. Until they hear our message, and until things will get worse. We are in a spiral now. You must have noticed that things are rapidly spinning now. We're on the edge of change. We're on the edge of change. And I think if For Britain can get the people behind it, the message is right. The message is right. We have a great message. We have a very pro-British message. If we can get that out, if we can get our vision clear, which is that we are pro-British, but we're not. I talk about white people quite often, actually, and the reason I do is because the anti-white thing is intended to weaken Europeans so that we may open our borders to all and sundry. That's the main reason, but also because it's wrong. It's clearly morally wrong to express this kind of contempt towards a racial group. Surely that's wrong. Why this crazy inconsistency? It can only be hatred. It can only be hatred. And my book that's coming out soon, my book that's coming out soon, I talk about this at great length, about this weakening of the West. And partly that's done by attacking white people all the time. But I need to say this, and I don't say this perhaps often enough. Let me clear up my view on the whole white issue. I believe that in our era, and we can go through anthropology, we can go through a million different eras, but in the world that we live in the era that we live in, our modern history, I think it is true to say that white people are the indigenous groups of Europe. I think that's I think we can rightly say that. I think we can rightly say that. That doesn't follow that Black Britons are not equal citizens. And this we need to get clear. Let's get this message clear. We can all be equal British citizens of equal value, equal rights, equal worth, while also acknowledging that the white majority is indigenous to this continent. I'm sorry, but that's how I see it. There's we have to be able to say that. White people need to be able to talk about being white and about how immigration is to us as the white natives of Europe. Now, I know what I'm going to get just for saying this. I've never said this publicly before, but I've got to. We've got to say this. It's really important. It's really important because lack of our saying this is losing us our countries, our democracy. The guilt is allowing this communist, hard, extreme left to take over and destroy everything and turn us into 1984. Yeah. And it's this hatred of ourselves as white people that's fundamentally at fault here. Islam would not have the power in this country or any European country if we weren't in self-hating defeat retreat mode. And we are in that mode because we are being told repeatedly by our leaders and by governments that we are guilty because we're white. And we're supposed to give up. We're supposed to, no other culture on this planet is supposed to do what we're supposed to do. No one else. No one else. I saw a brilliant tweet, and it might be a bit controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. I saw a brilliant tweet which said, why don't the left go to China and say there's too many Chinese cyclists in here? But, you know, why don't they, why is there only diversity? It drives me mad. And if you look at the mass movement, the globalism, we all know what globalism is. It's essentially the bringing down of the world's borders, and we're all going to amalgamate, and we're all going to live together, and it's all going to be wonderful. Of course, the whole thing is a contradiction by the diversity crowd, because the diversity crowd love diversity so much that they want to dilute us all into one so that there'll be no diversity after that. I like diversity. In other words, I like different cultures. I like different ways of doing things. I like the different colours and the different vibrancy of the world. I don't want us all to be the same. I don't want us all melted into one little pot and made into just one boring culture. I like the world with countries in it. I like the world with different cultures in it. So if we amalgamate everything, all of that will be gone. But that aside, if you look at this new globalist world we're supposed to be living in, have you noticed that all the immigration, all the borders are supposed to come down, so the whole world is in theory supposed to mix, but have you noticed that all the traffic is coming in this direction only? Have you noticed that? This is not about one world skipping through the long grass hand in hand together. It's about destroying the West. It's about destroying us. And again, it's not a conspiracy, it's real. It's real. I said in my book, second plug, I said in my book that if I was going to, I don't know why this is happening. Again, I think it's a mixture of things. Life usually is a mixture of things. Life is very complicated. It's never a simple answer. There's usually a host of different reasons going on at the same time. But if I was to set out to destroy European and Western society, I would do exactly what has happened in the last 10 or 15 years in Europe. That is how you destroy a European society and replace it with something else. Exactly what we've been doing. Denigrating the native people, destroying their culture in the schools, telling people how immoral they are. You're a colonialist, you're butchers. People even describing the Union Jack as the butcher's apron, this kind of stuff.
We're allowed to celebrate St. George's Day at school.
Don't celebrate St. George's Day. Well, if you can't celebrate, this is what Bristol Council said. If they couldn't afford to celebrate St. George's Day they couldn't celebrate St. George's Day because they couldn't afford to celebrate every other culture's day. So they had to drop St. George's Day. This is a council in an English city. I give you 50 pence to whoever can guess governs that council. Labour or Tory? Or definitely Labour.
75% majority running this city is unbelievable. The hole in the donut of Oxfordshire, all the surrounding councils are sane, but we have the map.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's frightening.
And of course we know that Oxford is not... it has had its share of problems on the grooming gangs as well. And it's one of the things I wrote in the report that Oxford was one of the cities I covered. And I find it's quite an extraordinary thing, really, because when people think about the grooming gangs as being the working class northern heartlands, and to me, the fact that it's going on in every town and city. With any sizable population of Muslims. It's true. It's true. But Oxford conjures up visions across the world of the elite, of the most prestigious university in the world. It conjures up that beautiful Englishness that it is. I mean, you drive around, it's stunning. Stunningly beautiful. It's English, it's characteristically English, it's beautiful. And it's happening here. It's happening here as well as in working class estates in Bradford. This is, it's happening in Telford, it's happening. This is not about, largely, I think it's not about the area, it's not about the victim, it's about the perpetrator. And I think we constantly focus, when it comes to the grooming gangs, focus on the victims. which in many ways is right, but I think it gives us an excuse not to focus on the perpetrators. And we need to focus a bit more on the perpetrators because we're avoiding that. We're avoiding that. And of course, it's dressed up, and I've noticed this over the years that I've been reading about this. It's dressed up as concern for the victims, but I don't actually buy it. When the newspapers say, it doesn't matter if they're Muslims. It doesn't matter if they're Muslims. It's completely irrelevant. Let's talk about the brave young girls who I agree, but it does matter that they're Muslims. And this sort of sickly virtue signaling, halo polishing, let's talk about the victims only, to me is all about ignoring the fact that these are Muslims. And it's happening here as it is everywhere there's a Muslim population. But to me, it's the image problem, or the image that Oxford conjures up versus the image that, say, working class Bradford conjures up. And it's happening in both those images. I just find that extraordinary. It's such an awakening. It's such an awakening. When I first heard it was happening in Oxford, it stunned me. I thought, that's it. It's the whole. You can't pick bits and pieces. You can't pick out somewhere and say it's likely to happen here. It's happening everywhere.
It's happening massively, and it's not being reported in the local. Even the local press aren't fully covering acquittals. There was a big acquittal. There have been 3 operations. Most people have only heard of Bullfinch. Very few people have heard that 11 and 12-year-old girls a girl, an 11-year-old was branded with a burning wire with the letter M for Mohammed, and that another girl was nailed to a table in a house opposite Mansleway Mosque, while men took turns. She was nailed to a table by her tongue. Hardly anybody in Oxford knows that. But the real victims, as well as these girls, are particularly the women in the Muslim ghettos, because their menfolk exercise these abuses, and they're trapped in a similar kind of ghetto, I would say, to the ghettos that existed in Italy in the Middle Ages for Jewish people. They were trapped. But I'm saying that there has to be openness and there has to be debate, and there isn't. It's not happening at all. And that's why Tommy Robinson was jailed, because he's one of the few voices, one of the few people who's raised their heads over the parapet, and it's so clearly wrong. Yeah, frightening.
Yeah, can't disagree with any of that. We're getting very short of time, so I'd like to take some questions. So I'll just finish off, if I may, by saying that the Britain that we are seeking to build, is one where a accountable government uses our taxes for our benefits, which is a small government which gets the basics right, which is housing, law and order, education, transport. Get those things right and then mind your own business. That's how I see the government. That's what we pay our taxes for. I believe in a free market, a thriving free market, alongside an efficient public sector, publicly run public sector. That's not a communist or socialist argument. It is simply the taxpayer is paying for it, therefore the taxpayer should be the paramount consideration. When you take private companies into public sector work, they have a legal obligation to prioritise their shareholders. I think public money should be spent prioritising the taxpayer. And I don't think we should be afraid of saying that. I believe in a common sense. I believe in common sense politics. What is the priority here? I want to see common sense politicians. So if you have, for example, a stringent budget, surely, let's look at the budget of the Metropolitan Police, for example. Sadiq Khan is consistently telling us that crime has gone insane in London because he doesn't have the resources. Now that's fair. He doesn't have the resources. We should restore policing to full numbers as priority. But if you have, as Sadiq Khan does, 900 plus hate crime officers dedicated to hate crime, you would think that with a bit of common sense, someone leading a community would think to themselves, you know what, for the moment, let's not bother about tweets and how hurtful they might be. Let's focus on the murders in the streets and put the police to better use there. This is what I want to see from our public services. I want to see the National Health Service publicly run with far less bureaucracy and which puts medical treatment above all other considerations. The NHS said it must confront white privilege. No, no, you must not confront white privilege. It's got nothing to do with you. Nothing. Fake pseudo-politics has nothing to do with the NHS. You will treat whoever is entitled to treatment regardless of their colour. You will stop the diversity nonsense. You will stop spending millions of pounds on political engineering. It's not your concern. You will treat people injured and sick to the best of your ability. You will research and develop new sciences to the best of your ability, and you will give the British people a health service that is the work that they deserve. You will give them the best health service you can give them. That's your job. Diversity, not your job. The police will enforce the law. Enforce the law. We must get rid of all the politically correct rubbish outside in the police force, and we must get rid and not be afraid to get rid of the recommendations of the Macpherson inquiry into the murder of Stephen Lawrence. I guarantee you, no one in politics, no one, and certainly no one in the House of Commons, is going to say a word that might be construed as negative towards the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. Never. But it was poison. The results injected poison into the legal system. They made it racialized. They made it racialized. In their attempt, their Orwellian excuse for getting rid, they said the Metropolitan Police was institutionally racist. And then they recommended that colourblind, and I quote directly, colourblind policing must be outlawed. Now take a minute to think about that. They wanted to get rid of racism, and the response was that colourblind policing should be outlawed. What they did was inject social engineering into the police. They made it so that the police should take greater consideration, for example, if a non-white person commits a crime, the police are supposed to consider their background, their social problems, social inequality, as if all black people live in terrible poverty and all white people live in riches. This is the kind of stuff that they propagate. It's poison. It's poison, and it has to go. We are offering the country one law for all. The police will be colourblind. The police will arrest based on the law. They will not be afraid, and they should not be afraid of being called a racist or losing their job. This should not be a situation where anyone from an ethnic minority who has committed a crime can say to the arresting police officer, I'm going to make a race complaint against you. And those police letting them go, and it does happen. It does happen. That should never be allowed to happen. And in a sane, just, lawful society, no one will be able to threaten the police in that way. They will enforce the law. Another thing that would happen in the Britain that we would create is an accountable public sector. People are tired. They are tired of the public sector. Chief executives, not councillors, chief executives on local government councils earning 6 figures. And they earn that 6 figures regardless of what's going on in the community they're supposed to be administering, the community they're supposed to be leading, the community they're supposed to be working for, no matter what. If homelessness goes up or down, they still take away 6 figures. If poverty goes up or down, they still take away 6 figures. Absolutely no accountability. I want to see that some system in place, and I think we'll vote on this as a party very soon, but I think there must be some kind of committee, and I know that's a horrible word, because it just screams bureaucracy, doesn't it? But some kind of committee of local activists, local people involved, volunteers at the local schools, for example, who have a board with teeth, so that when something like Rotherham happens, the local people can sack the chief constable of that police force that did nothing. It's important that they're sacked, but it's equally important that they're sacked by the people. It's equally important. Watch it change. Watch the public sector change. If the chief execs of hospitals and local councils and the chief constables of police, if the local people could actually sack them and take away their pension, watch how quickly the public sector becomes more efficient. Yes. Watch how quickly it happens. It's like deporting immigrants for violent crime. Watch how quickly it changes. Watch how quickly it changes. If you want to get rid of FGM, deport people. Deport people. It's as simple as that. That we should be going into these clinics and deporting the parents of children who have undergone this. Do it 4, 5 times. Watch it happen. Watch it change. Watch it change. People are tired of this. They're tired of appeasement. They're tired of people not being held to account. And here's another vision. The Britain I envision is one of responsibility as well as rights. People must be told that they have responsibilities. Children must be told in schools to respect themselves, to respect their neighbour, to respect their country, to respect law and order, to respect. They must also be taught how to work. It would be helpful also if they were taught the English language with a rather higher standard. This is aching to me. I love the English language. I'm traumatized by this texting culture that's destroying it. But that's it. We want a free, independent, democratic country where the government is accountable. We want an accountable, efficient public sector which puts the taxpayer first. We want a thriving, wealth-creating free market, absolutely. We want a police that enforce the law without fear, without favour, without consideration of racism. We want a country where people are free to speak their minds and express their opinion on any issue without any fear of losing their jobs or of being hounded out of whatever organisations they may belong to. People are afraid to speak for so many different reasons. We have to get rid of that. We have to get rid of hate speech laws, and we must enshrine freedom of speech in a new constitution for this country. I want a country which honours the past. I want the flag flying. I want the flag flying outside of schools. I want children taught of the great achievements of Great Britain. Not just about the dark bits which every country has, but not every country has the light. Not every country has the achievements that Britain has. Let's talk about them. Let's talk about them for a change. Let's teach children that almost every major sport in this world was invented in this country. Yeah. Let's teach them that the trial by jury, the rule of law, parliamentary democracy comes out of here, not to mention penicillin and the flushing toilet. And let's talk about the achievements of this country. Let's be proud. Let's stand tall among a continent of proud European nations which respect their heritage, their culture, their liberty, and which teaches their children respect. Respect. This is the Britain. This is the Britain I want to see. That is the clear vision. It's as clear as brief as I can offer it. Yeah. That is the clearest vision that I can offer of the Britain that I want to create. I want a British Britain that embraces of course we must embrace the things we have learned in the last several hundred years, but it will be British. It will be a British journey. It won't be interrupted by people from outside kicking us off kilter. It will be a British journey, it will be a European journey, and it's our journey. And we must have, from politics, a vision of a Britain post-European Union. And that's how I envision Britain post-European Union. I've gone way over, I'm so sorry. But I will take a couple of questions, but thank you very much for coming along.
Hi. A lot of politicians give in to the Muslim pressure because they're afraid of civil unrest. But they're also personally threatened, I'm sure. And we know some are, and some probably are, but we don't know about it. So have you been threatened, and do you have, because you will if you haven't yet, do you have any contingency plans to deal with what's going to come your way for sure?
Yes, I have been threatened. I've had the police at my door more than once telling me that I was under threat. My house is very secure. It depends on where I go, whether the level of security I bring with me. For example, at Speaker's Corner on Sunday, there was heavy security around me because it's a high-risk area. I realise that's going to get worse as the party gets bigger, and it will. The personal price, and I'm not saying this because I'm a martyr, I'm saying this because it's true. As this party gets bigger, the personal price I'll pay will be very, very high. And I'm very aware of that. But that's what else is there? I know that I'm at risk. I know I'm putting myself at risk. But look, I'm quite philosophical about it. If people want to get me, they're going to get me. I will protect myself as best I can. But I'm far more worried about, far more afraid of what happens if we don't do anything than I am if we do.
But the very fact that you have to deal with that, doesn't that say a lot about...
Of course it does. It proves me right. We know it's a violent religion. How did you have a hand up?
You've spoken a couple of times about FGM,
Yeah.
and I'd just like to ask you, the next time that you speak about it in public, whether you would consider mentioning circumcision, male circumcision, which is male genital mutilation. It's carried out in the Muslim community. It's carried out on a far greater scale on the baby boys than it is on the girls. And type 1A female circumcision is the most common form. That's easily, that's easily the same as removal of a boy's foreskin. And I just wondered if that's a cause that you would be interested in championing.
Look, let me be clear. I think male circumcision should be illegal, actually. I think
it is illegal.
Male circumcision isn't illegal.
No,
It's not illegal.
Not in this country.
It's not illegal.
They just don't prosecute.
Male circumcision is not illegal. It's not illegal. Female genital mutilation is illegal.
It's illegal under 1861 offences against the person.
It's not. There's no. Male circumcision is allowed.
It's not specifically illegal, but it's actual bodily harm.
In theory, yes, but it's allowed.
They just don't prosecute.
What's that?
They just don't prosecute for it.
When was male circumcision made a crime? It's not a crime.
1861.
No, you're relying on the Offences Against the Person Act, but where is the case law to say that applies to male circumcision?
There's no case law.
Well, then it's not illegal. You're not understanding how the law works. You're putting your own spin on the Offences Against the Person Act. Yes, in theory, it would be included under the Offences Against the Person Act, but it only becomes illegal if the Offences Against the Person Act has been applied in the Supreme Court or the House of Lords and created a precedent declaring male circumcision to be illegal. Male circumcision is not illegal. Whether you think it should be, and I agree with you, it should be. Under the Offences Against the Person Act, it should be, but it isn't. That has never been set as a legal precedent under the Offences Against the Person Act. The difficulty I have, and I get this a lot, it's almost as if people are a bit annoyed about girls getting all the attention here. There is no comparison to be made between the removal of the clitoris and the removal of the foreskin. And can I finish? We're talking about the removal of the foreskin, and actually in the clitoris, and among the Somali community, it was the highest FGM practicing community in this country. That's what is done. It's the worst one. It's the one where they sew it up. If I may, I will listen to you, but you have to listen to me. The problem I've got with in any way equating the two is that I think people who campaign on male circumcision expect that if we equate it with FGM, people will take it more seriously. What will happen, in fact, is that people will take FGM less seriously. And we cannot allow that to happen. They're two separate issues. One, because one is illegal and one isn't. And two, because you said it was far more widespread. I don't know. Have you got any evidence of that? Of the 100 or so million girls at risk of FGM?
Yeah, I was talking about the removal of the clitoral hood. It's the most common form of female circumcision.
Well, I don't call it female circumcision, I call it female genital mutilation. There are 4 different kinds. None of them are pleasant. And as I've already said, I believe male circumcision should be a criminal offence, but I don't campaign on them together because I know what will happen. I know that people will take FGM less seriously. Sorry, but that's the way it is.
I'm interested that Gerald Batten today sent communication, and I support him very, very strongly, but he sent out something today which we discussed a couple of days ago here in Oxford, a group of us who are Russophiles, and the public depiction by politicians of Russia is that partly because of Skripal and stuff like that, and Litvinenko, is that we are in a state of hostility with Russia. However, if you compare what happens in Saudi Arabia in terms of abuses, you know, I mean, it is on a different scale, and I think there is a lot of sense in England and Europe relying more, as the pragmatic Chinese have tried to do with their silk routes, new silk routes. They're establishing raw material reliance and cooperation with Russia, with the former Russian Soviet states that are now free, Kazakhstan, and so on and so forth. I can't understand why we are so tied to a regime as despicable as Saudi Arabia, which funds a lot of the Salafist Wahhabi mosques around Europe.
No, why we are. It's money.
It is money, and it's because our politicians are bought.
We're selling them a lot.
Yeah,
We're selling them a
weapons
lot.
particularly.
Look, Saudi Arabia has a hell of a clout, it has a hell of a grip, because even Donald Trump, now I like Donald Trump, but he really did disappoint when he made his first visit to Saudi Arabia. This is how much of a grip Saudi Arabia has on us, on the Western world, that even Donald Trump was willing to make that. It's something else. It really is.
Russia is surely a more natural NATO ally than Turkey.
I would have thought so.
Why is it that we are being brainwashed again by the lying media into this bogeyman image of Putin and co? I mean, he's no saint, but he is relatively wholesome compared to the Saudi regime.
Well, maybe they're focusing on Russia so they don't have to focus on the Saudis.
Yeah.
It's always easier to pick fights with people that you're not afraid of,
Very sad.
or that you're less afraid of.
But I'm saddened that Gerald has swallowed that brainwashing pill.
Well, it's not the first time.
I've got a very open question, because I don't have an answer myself for it, but this hate speech law is so pernicious, the way it silences people. It's a kind of a self-censorship law, isn't it? It makes people afraid to speak their mind because the law is so vague.
Yep.
They're worried about falling foul of it. Do you have any legal strategies to, try and overcome it somehow?
To get rid of it.
You have to get rid of it. The problem with the law is the problem with that law is that it's so deliberately vague and so interpretable, if that's a word, in any direction you want to send it. So it's subjective as well, so that there's no objective evidence needed, and that's scary. That's scary. So you can just accuse someone of racism or hatred or whatever kind of hatred it might be, and your feelings count as not just evidence but proof. I can say, well, I believe they were motivated by racism or homophobia or whatever it may be. Therefore, they were motivated by... That's what it's about. It's about creating fear. It's fear. It's so vague that even the police don't know what it's about. So the police, like everyone else, will err on the side of caution and just say nothing.
Yeah. It's shocking that it got through Parliament.
No, it's not. Not with the Parliament we've got.
What astounds me about it is that, for instance, people can tweet that they wish that Tommy will be killed in prison or tortured, and this isn't hate speech. Why isn't that hate speech? That's far worse than lots of things that people say. And yet it never...
Half of the Quran should be hate speech if we...
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, anyway.
What's your opinion on the identitarian movement in the UK?
I don't know enough about them. They've got a terrible reputation, but as I've said before, so do I. So I don't tend to go by press-created reputations. I've met a couple of chaps from it over the months, and various activism seem to me to be nice enough chaps. I don't know anything about them. If they invited me to speak, I'd go. If they invited me to form a formal alliance, I'd say no, as I would with anyone else. But I certainly have no issue that I know of to date that would make me worried, that would make me turn away from them.
I'd just like to raise a couple of things. I mean, one of the things that...
Can I just stop? Is there anyone else? Because I'm going to have to go pretty soon, but sorry, can I come to this?
Also, you're campaigning for a parliamentary seat in Lewisham East.
Yeah.
I don't know, is there a self or you have another candidate? I don't know. But so, if you had access to Parliament in some form, a seat, an open invitation to a particular select committee, a formal invitation from a Lord to have counsel with them that they would speak for you in the House of Lords, an open spot on some Sunday politics programme, I don't know. But for the argument of effectiveness' sake, what one issue, given that any of those platforms, would you like to see ultimately affected by your campaign? Just one issue.
I don't think that's doable. I don't think that's doable. It's very hard to separate issues like that. You can talk about one issue, but the reason for the issue is that it affects
in politics to affect things that you believe have universal value. So you would amend or repeal legislation on that basis, entering into politics, surely.
Say that again.
You'd be involved in either amending, repealing,
yes,
or changing legislation.
Yes. On every question, I would ask myself whether it's in the best interest of the British people or not. That's the first thing. You can't possibly predict what's going to come up. But in every question, I would ask myself that question.
You're a bit of a Platonist. You think of the greatest good all the time.
What is in the interest of those who elected me? That's my duty. That's as a constituency MP, that would be my duty. If I was in the cabinet, it would be a duty to the best interests of the people of this country. Of course, you've got to consider what's the greater good for most people. None of this is easy. None of these decisions, when you're in a position like that, none of your decisions are going to be easy. You're going to have to answer great moral questions.
There's people who are already disillusioned in politics that would listen to you. But what about the voting majority? They're not going to want to hear a complex message to convince them not to vote Tory.
But that's exactly what I'm not offering, is a complex message. But when you're asking me what I would do as an MP, that's a complex answer. Well, because everything that comes up is to be...
forcing the response, hopefully, that if I said, is there just one thing that you could prioritise?
Democracy.
Democracy itself?
Yeah. Getting the voice of the people. If the people had a voice, we wouldn't be having these problems. If the majority was actually heard, if the system worked, if the democratic system worked, i.e. the candidate to the voter without being filtered through the lies of the government and the media, if that worked, we wouldn't be in these problems. We wouldn't have these problems. I trust the majority. So therefore, to me, all problems can be at least dealt with or brought in the right direction by the majority voice. And that's what we're not hearing. That's what we're not hearing.
So making democracy work, even the existing democracy work over the lies of the media, would also...
Nothing's going to be perfect. Nothing's going to be perfect. We can only do what we have in front of us now. We have to play within the game that's already been created, but we have to do the best we can. What I want is to push us in the direction of greater accountability of those who have power, therefore giving the people a greater voice. That, to me, will solve a great deal of our other specific problems. What's missing, to me, is that there is no push. Actually, there's a push in the other direction. The elite is pushing the people away from say by creating more and more obstacles for people. Even in bureaucracy, even in hiring a hall, you can see it. It's getting more and more difficult for the ordinary person to get a voice. That is the way I want to push politics. And in every opportunity that presents itself in practical day-to-day work, That's what I would do. Okay, I do have to go. I will take one more from you, please.
How do we get past the toxic media? How do we, this is the biggest problem, it's the Breitbart thing about politics being downstream from the culture, right? How do we get past this stuff? Because they're relentless and they're getting worse because I think
they're getting worse because they're losing.
Exactly.
They're getting worse because they're losing. But take, you know, have faith. Take heart from that. Take heart from that. I do. Two ways we can get around them. One, the internet.
Yeah.
Thank God for the internet. Whether you believe or you don't, thank God for the internet. Without it, we would be in big trouble. Without it, we would never have heard about Cologne, for example. Just one example off the top of my head. We would never have heard about it. The other way is something I preach about all the time, leaflets. Leaflets.
Sorry?
Leaflets.
Old-fashioned leaflets.
Good old-fashioned leaflets. We've been using it for centuries for a reason. We don't have my leaflets. I've got a lockup of leaflets. But I was going to ask before I leave, if anyone if anyone wants to set up a For Britain branch for Oxford, please do step forward. We will provide you with just that, with resources, with leaflets, with a payment for any venues you want to hire to pay for meetings. If you would like to, please do, please do. All we need is a chair and a secretary to sign data protection forms, and then we will help you with leaflets and venues and data, membership data and all that, whatever you need. Thank you all for coming out, and thank you for your support.